Okay, hopefully it will end up great. It's my second. I always use this as a guest, so it's my first time. I mean, I tried before having this interview with a friend of mine. It worked fine, but hopefully it will also work fine now.
You mean
Okay.
This application or what? Or
Yes,
this,
the StreamYard application. I usually have my guests here in Istanbul, so we are usually sitting side by side. So this is the first time, but this looks okay. Okay, if you're ready.
You could have waited until tomorrow, because as it happens, I'm flying to Istanbul tomorrow.
No way! Why didn't you tell me?
I thought, well, I didn't make the connection, but I thought maybe you knew about that, because I'm speaking at the so-called Turkey Future Forum, where I've been invited to give a talk, and so I thought maybe that's how you found my name or something. But yeah, it's my first time actually, and it's tomorrow.
I wish I knew that you're flying to Istanbul. How long are you gonna stay here for?
I'm gonna stay until Saturday.
Oh, okay. Let me know if you have time so we can grab a drink.
Yeah, great idea. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So, Hanno, thanks for joining us today. Your book
Thanks for the invite.
Very popular on my channel. So I think as of today, it has like around 20,000 views. And it's also translated to Turkish, so hopefully it will positively influence the sales as well.
Yeah, I hope so too.
But people found it very interesting, and it's very interesting that somehow the Turkish philosophy scene is very vivid for reasons that I am yet to understand. People are just hungry for philosophy. So, and everyone's so excited. Like all of my subscribers are very excited to listen to you speak on your book today. And thanks for joining me again. Okay, so today I'm joined by Dr. Hanno Sauer. He's the Associate Professor of Philosophy at Utrecht University, and his work focuses on ethics, metaethics, and moral psychology. And he brings together insights from psychology, anthropology, evolutionary theory, archaeology to tell the bigger story of morality. And it's a very interdisciplinary work that Hanno is doing, so I'm very excited to talk about it. He's also the author of several books, including Moral Thinking, Fast and Slow, Debunking Arguments in Ethics, and most recently, and that the book that we're going to talk about, The Invention of Good and Evil, a Global History of Morality. And in this book, he takes us on a journey from our evolutionary past to the present, showing how cooperation, punishment, inequality, and identity have shaped the moral worlds we live in. And I'm very excited, again, to explore his ideas today and talk to him more in depth about his most recent book. First of all, when I read your book, I was quite surprised because the last time I was in academia, I studied philosophy at the University of Manchester, by the way.
Cool.
Like philosophy was, I mean, as an academic discipline, kind of conservative towards interdisciplinary work. And your work is so interdisciplinary. I was wondering, as I was reading this book, it's very empirical. And so I was quite surprised if you received any backlash in your department, whether this qualifies as philosophy. How does the academics around you respond to your interdisciplinary approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that I do get. Is this even philosophy to begin with? I don't know whether I would consider that backlash. I mean, it's not a word of praise to describe something as philosophy. It's just like another discipline, right? So if whatever I do turns out not to be philosophy, it wouldn't bother me, right? So it's not, I want to talk about the topics. I want to talk about, say, the history of morality or social inequality or whatever the topic is that I care about. And I'm going to use any concept or idea or theory that I find useful and illuminating to help me understand that thing, that topic. And I think it's philosophy, but I wouldn't mind so much if people don't want to call it that, because in the end, it's just a label. And no one really knows what philosophy is clearly defined anyway. It's just sort of what's left after Many of the other disciplines have been separated from it. We have biology and physics and so on and so on. All of this used to be philosophy and back in Greece. And now it's in ancient Greece. And now philosophy is just sort of, an intellectual endeavor that's sort of left. But what you describe may be something that applies more to the UK. So you said that you studied at the University of Manchester. Now I'm at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. And in the UK, I think you have a more traditional understanding of philosophy as being focused on analyzing concepts and reflection that is not accompanied so much by other disciplines. In the Netherlands, it's more strongly encouraged to at least be in dialogue with other disciplines that may be relevant to your work. Social sciences, psychology, the cognitive sciences, economics, and whatever. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah, because in the UK, like school, it's more like, philosophy is a rational discipline. It's not an empirical discipline. You think about things rationally, and you don't need to look at like real world data or, say historical data. So that's why I was quite surprised.
And I do think that is a mistake.
Yeah.
So I have a view on that, right? So I think that, for instance, if you want to know how the mind works, if you want to know how the mind works, you need to study how the mind works, right? And you can't just reflect on how we use words, about thinking or perceiving or whatever to find out how the mind works, because that's just not possible. So I do think that an approach that is at least open to empirical input is superior and better. But at the end of the day, it sort of reflects a difference in the understanding of what philosophy is supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. I teach philosophy, psychology, and sociology, and I had to teach myself and take some college credits because, that's the Ministry of Education criteria to become a philosophy teacher in high school. And when I taught myself sociology and psychology, I was like, wait, like lots of questions in philosophy are answered by these disciplines, and we're just, okay, it's fun to discuss. But, I think philosophy can benefit from interdisciplinary approaches a lot. So
for sure.
Thanks for that. And it's gonna be boring, but I'm gonna agree with you. So throughout your book, you call for an approach of deep history of morality. And, you drove on, as I mentioned, genetics, anthropology, and psychology. What do you think are the advantages of this method, and what risks? We already talked about the advantages, and what are the risks that to be such a big scope of disciplines when you're working?
I mean, another big advantage is, of course, that morality is not something that was built or designed by a person, right? It's not like there's no clear idea behind what it is. It grew out of different things, out of the kind of animal we are and the kind of climate that we live in and what we are surrounded by and so on and so on. So it's a messy thing. Right? That's why you need to study it historically, because it came about historically, right? So in that sense, I agree with people like Nietzsche, also Marx to some extent, is that Foucault in a way, right? If you want to understand a messy thing that wasn't designed by anyone rationally, you need to be an archaeologist, right? You need to dig, right? And you need to excavate the foundation. That's what I try to do in the book. Of course, a big disadvantage is that philosophers sometimes say you are hostage to the empirical data, right? So if you draw on a study, for instance, like a psychological experiment, and it turns out that it's flawed or it's false or it doesn't really hold up, then your philosophical conclusions are also invalidated a little bit, right? So the more you draw on empirical input, when that empirical input gets overturned, your points and claims and arguments get overturned as well.
Yeah.
Now, there is of course an analogous risk that if you don't draw on empirical input, your arguments are going to get overturned by the next a priori argument. But that's one specific disadvantage, and that has indeed happened I've worked in sort of this empirical approach for a couple of years now, almost 20 years. And many of the studies that I thought were interesting and illuminating 15 years ago are no longer considered valid. Right? They didn't replicate, or they were straight up faked. And so many of the things that I used to say are just now not considered defensible anymore. Doesn't bother me, but it's a risk.
Yeah, and there is a replication crisis in especially social sciences disciplines.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
But did you feel overwhelmed by, trying to take input from a lot of different disciplines? You take us to like millions of years before, and it's such a wide scope. Did you feel like, I think I'm not going to be able to do this at any point? It's a very ambitious project.
Yeah, it's very ambitious. And I think in some sense it's too ambitious for anyone. So it almost cannot be done. And so many mistakes or problems with the book may just be because it's too ambitious. But I can't say that I feel overwhelmed. It depends on whether you find a way of organizing the material that you have. And I literally, so in case listeners and viewers don't know, the book has 7 chapters and a long conclusion, and these 7 chapters, they have a sort of temporal chronological order, and they start 5 million years ago, and then you have these logarithmic steps 500,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, 5,000, 500, 50, and 5, and 5 is sort of the present. And I found that structure literally like that. Right, so it just occurred to me because I was sort of like in conversation with my agent, my literary agent, like, how do we organize this material? What do you want to write about? What's this book really going to be? And then one night it just sort of like occurred to me that could be something, and I texted him, and he immediately texted me back like 1 o'clock in the evening, and he said, "Yeah, that's it, that's the book." And then you don't feel overwhelmed anymore because you have this organizing structure in your mind. I knew exactly what to do, and I just had to write it down for 3 years. And so don't feel overwhelmed, but you're right. It's a very ambitious project to have this super huge history of all of humankind. And maybe it was a little bit too ambitious in the end.
No, it's a brilliant book. You were like, if not, Yuval Noah Harari can do it.
It's brilliant, but maybe failed.
No, don't say that. So I want to ask you, because I also teach philosophy, of course, in a high school setting, and you teach ethics and metaethics. So I always feel like when we are talking about metaethics, and I'm sure you also thought about this, there's always this risk that students walk away feeling that, or readers, morality is arbitrary, or ethical norms don't apply to them because it's a social construct. Do you see this as a genuine danger, as the extension of your teachings or your books? Or do you address that risk in your teaching or writing?
Well, it's only a danger if it's false, right? So if moral relativism is correct, then teaching students who are turned into relativists by your teaching would be great, right? Because they now know the truth. But my impression is more, so I'm surprised that you say this to some extent, because my impression is more that students arrive as moral relativists. They arrive with the idea that morality is arbitrary and it's just a social construction and there's nothing beneath it or underlying it or behind it. And indeed, I've often made the experience that students find the idea that morality could possibly not be relative. They find that almost incomprehensible. So when you teach ethics, you consider many outrageous arguments, right? You consider whether people should give away all their money, or whether taxes are theft, or whether there should be no government, or whether everyone should have exactly equal money, or you consider ideas whether infanticide is permissible, or whether humanity should cease to exist, for instance. All of these outrageous ideas that no one outside of a philosophy seminar ever even thought about. And students are very willing to think about these ideas. And oh, this is interesting. Let's talk about killing babies. And it's fine, right? But when you tell them, look, it could be that actually morality and moral norms and values are universal, and some people just get it wrong. They completely reject that, right? And I've never really found an answer why that is, but it's definitely a very, very. I've repeatedly encountered that and saw that students are especially reluctant to even consider the possibility that morality could be anything but relative and arbitrary. Maybe that's because
I think there's a representation bias there. That's something about philosophy students.
Yes, indeed. It could be a selection effect where people who are more willing to think that morality is arbitrary self-select into philosophy. That's part of it. I'm just not sure why it's so strong, and that makes me wonder why that is.
Yeah. Because I teach a mandatory course and not everyone's into philosophy, so I feel
good.
like
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, my students there, by the way, 18, 19, so they're kind of college level.
Yeah.
They're like, most of them are moral universalists, so it's an
interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So also I wanted to ask you, there was this research that I found that, most I don't know if this is correct. This might be an urban legend. I'm not sure if the data still holds up, but I remember vividly reading this. The books that are unreturned in college libraries are mostly overwhelmingly by philosophy ethics teachers. So, and the idea was that, the argument is that when you read a lot about ethics and when you reflect about ethics and metaethics, you feel like, they're just arbitrary. So you don't need to, you can just steal a book from the library. Like, it's not gonna hurt anyone, kind of thing. So that's where my question kind of stemmed.
Yeah. So, well, I know I think that's a study by Eric Schwitzgebel, and I don't think it's that ethicists are worse. I think the idea is that they are no better than the rest. Right? It's not that they are especially bad at it, and especially unlikely to return books, but they also apparently their ethics education hasn't made a difference.
Yeah, but I did kind of specialize in ethics, and I felt like when I was reading a lot of ethics as a student, it kind of made me feel like, I'm exempt from it, or I can find an ethical argument to justify my unethical actions. So there is that. You become very literate at finding excuses for your immoral actions.
I still have one book from the library from when I was a student that I never returned, and the problem is it's bad. I didn't even steal a good book, but it sucks.
So you stole it so that others won't read it.
Yeah, well, I did that wasn't the motive, but in fact, me stealing it was a good idea because now the public is protected from the nonsense.
What book was this? Do you remember?
It's Sebastian Rödel's Kategorien des Zeitlichen.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear about that. Okay. What do you think about the secular project of philosophical ethics? Ethics, as you always mentioned in your book, is very intertwined with a lot of religious teachings and lots of cultural, traditional norms. And, I'm just saying this for our audiences. The project of philosophical ethics is to find a secular, non-cultural, rational way to do the right actions, or rule book for right actions. Do you think systems like, Kantian ethics, virtue ethics, or consequentialist theories have actually shaped the history of morality in any deep way? Or are they more like, commentaries on a story that was already being written elsewhere?
I mean, I tend to think that largely history goes its own way and isn't so much influenced by these ideas, but at the same time, there is some influence. I mean, it's obvious that Marxism has had an influence on society, right? And there's literally just a guy who wrote books, right? And obviously, utilitarianism, I think, started as a social movement, right, to improve society, and they came up with ideas, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, for what that would mean for how society is supposed to look, and that had some influence on how people thought about society and how it should work. Certainly, you have examples where the animal rights movement, for instance, to prevent factory farming and to promote a vegetarian or a vegan lifestyle, was very heavily influenced by philosophical arguments. You could even say started in many ways, but certainly shaped by philosophical arguments. These days, you have effective altruism, for instance, where people, try to get the citizens of wealthy nations to donate money to the global poor and so on and so on. So it can have some influence, but also we shouldn't overestimate it. Often the real decisions are made elsewhere, and power plays out on its own terms. But ideas can have some influence, yeah. That includes philosophical ideas.
This is kind of a general personal question. What motivates you to teach philosophy? And with students coming from very different backgrounds and expectations, what do you see as the real value of exposing them to philosophical thinking, ideas on ethics and metaethics? What motivates you to teach and write?
So the writing came first. I'm actually, in a way, a failed novelist.
Oh.
Right. So I wanted to write when I was like 15 or something. My idea was I wanted to become a novelist, right? I wanted to write these sort of, big family novels that really capture the essence of our time or something, right? Like The Great Russians or whatever. And I'm not trying to ridicule that idea, but that was the original idea. And I found out that I just didn't have a story to tell. So I never started, right? I never started my novel. And I thought, I guess I just need to learn how to write. And I need to study the works of other people. So I studied literature. And as a second subject, at the time we had to pick 2 subjects at university in Germany. I picked philosophy because I thought that, many of the important, interesting writers, they had philosophical education, right? And they were writing about these deep ideas like life and death and grief and love and failure and ambition and so on and so on. Time. So I thought I should study literature and philosophy in order to become a writer, right? A novelist. And then I needed a job as a student.
Okay.
Because I moved into a different apartment that I really wanted to in the best location, right at the market square, and I wanted to live there, and so I needed money. And I realized that I had no skills that people would pay me for, so I couldn't be a bartender because I don't really like people. And I couldn't do anything. So but I knew that I could talk about philosophy. And as it happened at the time, there was a position as a teaching assistant advertised at our Department of Philosophy at my university. And so I applied for that. And I got the position. And I later found out that I got the position because I was the only one of the applicants that had handed in a written application. Right? All the others were just sort of like walking into the office of the professor, say, hey, could I be the guy? And I handed in, a written thing with to whom it may concern, I hereby apply, blah, blah, blah. And that's the way I got the job. And I was very happy with that. And I realized that I'm pretty good at explaining philosophy to students, right? And it was so funny and weird and silly but I was maybe in this 5th or 6th semester or something, just like a teaching assistant. But I immediately like behaved like a professor, like a total idiot. I immediately like assumed that role of explaining, and I immediately sort of like didn't feel like a normal student anymore, like, you know, insane really, because I totally was a normal student, but it was just like the way I behave, I guess. But I realized that I could teach philosophy, and then I thought, oh, I'm really interested in these ideas. Maybe I could do a PhD. And it turned out that I was pretty good at that. And so I just sort of stayed in this profession because I was really interested in the ideas, and everything always worked. And now I'm a professor, and yeah, it's pretty good.
What about teaching? Do you feel satisfaction out of, do you feel like you're doing something beneficial to the kids when you expose them to these ideas?
I mean, you never know. Teaching is satisfying. I also find teaching very exhausting. So when I give a lecture of 90 minutes, basically I feel like I'm done for the day, right? I feel it's very exhausting, and sometimes I have to do 2 or 3 lectures a day, and then I'm dead, in the evening. I can't do anything anymore. I immediately fall asleep. So I find it it's rewarding and satisfying, but it's a lot of work, and it's also exhausting. And the stuff that motivates me to keep going is that I always encounter new ideas that I find fascinating, and I enjoy explaining new ideas to students. And you can tell that it's definitely a strong thing that students can tell whether or not you are excited about the topic, right? Yeah. And if you really give them the idea, oh wow, look, say you explain evolution or something, and you really convey the sense that this was something dramatic at the time, right? This is really something that people were upset about it. People couldn't believe it, or people defended it. People thought about these ideas, and it meant something. Or I often like to tell students about the first time I read some philosopher, right? And these were really monumental biographical moments that I remember, right? I remember exactly where I was when I read that book, right? Or when I read that book, which vacation that was. The scene is just still there in my memory. And when you tell students about ideas in this, by generating excitement, that's really interesting and funny. So and motivating. And I often tell students, look, Nietzsche, for instance, is amazing because it's so unique and so spectacularly written, and it's very seductive. And I try to warn students about it, right? I try to tell them, look, it's better if you don't start studying philosophy by reading Nietzsche. So I really warn them and tell them, it's amazing, it really changes your life, but you should wait a little bit. And you should maybe study philosophy for a couple of years first, because before you even dare to read Nietzsche, and you can tell that their eyes just start to shine, and they cannot wait to get that book and start reading Nietzsche.
Zarathustra is like a gateway drug to philosophy.
There's a type of guy who's like a Nietzsche guy, right?
There's a pipeline.
But if you ask me in general whether exposing students to ideas is a good or a bad thing, that's hard to say, because there can always be the next fascist dictator that you're teaching, right? You never know. I think my job is to explain ideas to people in a way, in a competent way and in an interesting way. And what people do with that is their business and their problem.
Okay. By the way, when I was looking at your other interviews so that I wouldn't ask the same questions over and over again, and I was listening to your other interviews, I heard in one of your interviews that you said, my work is like Nietzsche, but true. Yes. It was very funny. That made me laugh out loud. Who are your inspirations? Do you get any inspirations from I'm sure you're also a philosopher now and you inspire people, but maybe from your younger years, who inspired you?
Yeah, I did enjoy the classics. I always enjoyed Kant, Hegel, Schopenhauer. Love Schopenhauer. I think he's the greatest philosophical writer in the German language.
Yeah.
Nietzsche, Heidegger. I enjoyed studying analytic philosophy and philosophy of language starting in the late 19th century, Vienna Circle, Quine Davidson, Brandom. I liked that. I read that all that stuff. Critical theory, Frankfurt School. That's something that I know quite well and that I appreciate. And now I have lots of people but mostly contemporary people that I find interesting. A philosopher that I greatly admire is Joseph Heath, for instance, from Canada, and a lot of his work has been very influential on my on my own work. I enjoy, even if I disagree with them, but I always really liked Michael Humer, who's an interesting guy. He did a little bit of a turn in recent years that I found less impressive. It's a lot of wokeness and culture war stuff, but his philosophical work is always very interesting and surprising. And so I like the classics, and I like lots of contemporary people as well.
What about more popular figures like Slavoj Žižek and stuff?
I mean, Žižek is funny, but it's more like a comedian. I don't think that's philosophically. It's not philosophically very interesting. But it can be fun to watch as the guy is sort of like is mumbling, coked up, and so on and so on. It's fun to watch, but
let me tell you a Stalin joke kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. You know the difference between this one concept and this other concept is psychoanalytically understood. So that can be funny.
Wow, that was a flawless impression. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, I can do them all. And it's funny, but I think the substance of the arguments isn't very good.
Yeah, definitely. I would. He's an interesting character, and I'm glad he's around. But yes, so like by the way, when I was I read your book first, and when I was looking at your videos and speeches, the first thing that I thought of, and which you could have thought of as an alternative career choice, maybe to become a villain in a James Bond movie. You have that aura.
I take that as a great compliment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hanno. It was a pleasure to speak with you on your work and also a little bit about your life as well. And thanks for sharing that with us, because I did an extensive video on your book. I didn't really want to dig into all of the arguments. I just was curious about how you integrate that as a person. This is something that I think about, because I work in a very competitive school, and our students, like, we teach them lots of cool ideas on philosophy, and they go and start working in Palantir or some other evil corporation. So I like, this is something that I wanted to ask as someone who also teaches philosophy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the invite. I enjoyed it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time.